So to start things off, again, we're talking about the workforce. So once again, thank you to the Aerospace Corporation for sponsoring this session. And our moderator for this session is Ed Bolton, Senior Advisor to the CEO at the Aerospace Corporation. Ed is a retired United States Air Force Major General who also served as a senior executive at the FAA and as a senior vice president in the space defense industry. During his military career, he served as a commander at both Vandenberg and Patrick Air Force bases, as well as on the White House staff in 2 administrations. After his military career, Ed moved to the FAA, where he was the assistant administrator responsible for leading the modernization of the national airspace system. And in 2019, Ed retired from his role as senior vice president of the systems group at the Aerospace Corporation, but he continues to serve as a senior advisor to the organization's CEO. Ed, welcome to you in the panel. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Is this on? Is this on? Can I be heard through this, or do I stand up and shout? You got me heard. All right. So that's a little longer than we really needed, Jim. But thank you very much. We'd like to thank the American Astronautical Society for this opportunity to talk about a very important issue. I'm going to introduce the panel. Each person will have about 5 minutes to talk about why they're passionate about this topic, and then we interact with you all. We've got some great questions staged, but we mostly want to hear what's on your minds. So let me start to my right with Mr. Eddie Gonzalez, who's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead for Heliophysics, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. He has an interesting bicoastal background. He goes way back in LA to the Rodney King days, and then here to the George Floyd days. So he's going to talk a little about that. Next, we have Dr. Christine Hartzell, Associate Professor of Aerospace Engineering, University of Maryland. I would call her bimodal because she's interested in asteroids and debris and also interested in human capital. So an engineer who's interested in people, and can't wait to hear what she has to say. Then Mr. Jay Patel, who also is a person that has 2 passions. He's Vice President of Programs at Northrop Grumman, having been a Vice President. Those are very difficult jobs, but he finds time to really worry about diversity, equity, and inclusion and people issues as well. And then we have Ms. Erica Stacy, who is the HR Director of SAIC Space Business Unit. She's focused on the broad spectrum of human capital issues, and she flew all the way up from Florida last night to be here with us today. So welcome aboard, panel. We expect some great things from you. So let's start, first let's start with Mr. Jay Patel. Give us 3 to 5 minutes about what's on your mind.
Ed, thank you very much. And as Ed mentioned, I have the pleasure of leading a business portfolio that deals with restricted payloads that do a lot of cool things that I can't tell you about, but really benefits our nation and everybody here, that needs that protection. But that's my day job. My A job is I'm also a co-chair of our DE&I&B, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging group for our entire sector. So I have the pleasure to help each and every one of our employees in a different way, not just what they need to do for work or having them best prepared for work. I am passionate about this subject, as anybody would be, because it's personal. I am lucky to be where I am, and that's really because of allies, friends, mentors, other people that didn't have to help me, but they did. And so I just want to see that I do that for others, right? So that's really kind of why I'm passionate about it. And then if you're around for the last couple of years, how could you not be affected or want to do something with what's going on in the world? So a couple of different events that have happened that really made me think differently about what I could do or what I should do. So I am really, really happy to be here today. I can't wait to hear what's on your mind and see if we can help with that. And with that, I think I'm ready. So back to you, Ed.
Thank you very much. Very much. Christine.
Great, yes. So I'm a professor in aerospace engineering. And, as a professor, I see these students in my classroom, and it's a whole lot more diverse than the world that they're going out to work in aerospace engineering. And, so we try to prepare the students both technically as well as, socially for the challenges that they're going to encounter. And I just hope that we can create an environment that is going to allow these people to continue to grow. grow in their careers, and that we provide them the opportunity to achieve both technically and, you know, in sort of management roles as well. So happy to discuss this issue.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much. Eddie Gonzalez, please.
Thank you, Ed. I could take up the remaining of this conference up until 2 o'clock to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, but I was told I have 3 to 5 minutes. So when I tell people about the passion of my work, I talk about my left bookend, and he mentioned Rodney King. Before I came to NASA, I worked at an international law firm on the West Coast for 16 years. And during that time, the unfortunate incident with Rodney King and the LA riots happened. The managing partner at the firm that I worked at, Warren Christopher, was the commissioner for the Christopher Commission that looked into the police brutality of the LAPD and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. And I humbly was the coordinator for that commission. So I learned quite a bit from the private sector as well as what was going on in that particular time. And then in 2020, we all know the unfortunate incident that happened to George Floyd. And because of that, the position of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility was created in our code 670. And it has been such a passion for me to see the things that we're doing, including closing the gap with contractors and civil servants. And it's something that I don't think is talked about enough. When you have contractors that are providing 2/3 of the workforce at agencies all over the nation, we need to make sure that they're not being treated like second-class citizens, and it's very, very important. And I think that we're doing an amazing job of closing that gap at Goddard. Employee resource groups, making sure that they're active and that we have champions that can double down on anything that we are concerned about. I am very active in all of the ERG groups at Goddard, but in particular, let's just talk about the Latinx Hispanic. I know Mark Clampin is in the room somewhere. Before he went over to headquarters, he was a champion for that group. So that just goes to show you the commitment that Goddard has when it comes to the employee resource groups. Mentoring programs at Goddard are absolutely vital, especially for the students that are in row 9. What I want you to do as you're going through your career is to make sure that you not only mentor, but when you get to your mid-career, that you mentor down, because you want to make sure that, for me, what is happening, you are our future. So I would ask one of you to mentor me, to tell me what is the latest and greatest that's going on in your world, so I know. Institutional knowledge, and how do we solve that? During the pandemic, a lot of the folks that had that institutional knowledge, they may not have been in their office. They may not have been able to go to an early career hires office to say, let me see your dry erase board and see what you're working on. So we need to solve that as well. And of course, providing the necessary tools for the people that are working at home, starting with ergonomics and working all the way up to software and anything else that they may need. And I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Erica Stacy.
Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me here. You know, the past 5 years that I've spent in aerospace and defense has definitely been an evolution. And there is no disagreement that the pandemic really accelerated our future of work. And we were forced to reimagine the how, the why, the when, and the where of how we do the work today. And that reimagining is only going to continue as we proceed towards 2030 and beyond. You know, the industry is going to continue to prioritize digitization, modernization, you know, innovation. And while it's important to really focus on this technology, it's the non-technological elements that are equally as critical. Among them, obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, you know, DE&I is really a catalyst for innovation, right? Diverse backgrounds, you know, ideas, thoughts, they have true business benefits. They lead to better outcomes, to stronger decision-making, and obviously to greater acceptance. And, you know, it's great that we have all these goals and metrics to measure it. But I think what's really important is when our customers see their suppliers and when our workforce looks to their leadership, it's what they see. And then, you know, inclusivity. We want to make sure that all these diverse voices are heard, and they're given the equal opportunity to be heard. So that, coupled with our need to be agile, our need to be flexible, I think that really positions us towards, our workforce in 2030. And, for SAIC, it's definitely consistent with our mission. We want to partner to transform the government and enhance, our nations and our citizens, and we do that through innovative solutions, and that's driven by our diverse talent and our technology. So I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation today, and again, I thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So I guess I have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about why I'm passionate about this topic and a little bit about what aerospace is doing. So the turning point, my career is I'm a launch guy, launching rockets, Air Force mostly, and was happily retired, enjoying life. But then when George Floyd was murdered, and it wasn't a murder, I mean, my life was bookended by Emmett Till. You can look that up if you don't know who that is. I was born that year. And so it wasn't the shock that those things happened. Those things have happened literally my whole life. It was the fact that the outpouring and the amount of people that really cared. You look around the country, around the world, people were demonstrating. And so when our CEO, old friend Steve Osakowitz, said, would you come back and help us out part-time working on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I said, here is my last shot to do something meaningful to help the country that I love. And so that's why I'm here. What aerospace is doing is that at that time, we started by putting together a leadership group and focusing on these areas, recruiting, retention, and representation. We've made some good progress. And a year or so ago, Steve reached out to a number of his CEO peers, and they made a commitment that together, you can start off with aerospace, we're trying to expand this. So now we have 30 companies. Some of the companies that are at this table are part of this effort. They would focus and have a pledge in several areas to try to reach 5 million students, K through 12 STEM, try to increase the number of diverse interns to 3,000, and try to increase the amount of diversity in our technical workforce and the amount of diversity in our technical leadership team. And you can go through the numbers. And why is diversity the key? Well, right now there's 10 million open jobs. We have the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in this country in 50 years. HR people, it is intense competition for the best people right now. So this country is only going to get more diverse. If you look at the 50 million high school students or K through 12 students out there, it's half diverse, which means the pipeline behind us is increasingly diverse. But as Christine said, the further you go up the pipeline, the less diverse it is, right? And so if you look at a broader perspective and look at all of what America has to offer when you're doing recruiting, retention, and mentoring, you have a better opportunity to fill a better workforce. And that's what's going to keep us number one in space. And I hope to live a long time, but I hope that I don't live long enough to see a world in which the United States is not number one in space. And you think, what would that mean for our economy, for our national security? What would that mean in Taiwan, right? So it's literally a national security issue. It's not just about fair, it's not about just doing right, it's a smart thing to do. So that's what Space Workforce 2030 is about, that the leadership team is committed to collecting data and holding ourselves accountable through 2030 and beyond. So that's our opening statements. I have some canned questions here, but I would be delighted to entertain any thoughts that you all have. And while people are scrambling to get up to the mic, I'll start with Jay. Would you please tell me what your organization is doing right now to help ensure a strong workforce in 2030?
Sure, I'd love to. Do I get 3 hours? Because I may need that. We're doing, so the easy answer is we're doing a lot, like I think everybody's organization that's represented here today. I could probably slice and dice this many different ways, but I think I'll do it this way, something we can all relate to regardless of our backgrounds or our disciplines or careers. Mind, body, soul. So let's start with the mind. As anybody that wants to come into their career or this industry or the workforce, we tend to focus on what can we learn, What are the challenges that are out there that I can show people that I can accomplish or achieve? So we really want to focus on just that growth that we all have, that's innate to all of us that are in the STEM fields. So we have all kinds of different programs that I'm sure you're very much used to, like Education Assist, formal and informal mentoring programs, knowledge sharing opportunities, because we all know there's many different ways to share knowledge. So we really try to think of our employees, we call it cradle to post-retirement, because we want you back after you retire as well, if you want to. But all of the different things along the way to keep your mind where it needs to be, challenged, up to date, add skills, whatever's you need or would like to grow. And it doesn't just have to be your career, right? You could just be interested in something. And that's where we have other groups and ERGs and other things that can just give you knowledge in an area of interest, not necessarily in an area of your professional career. So that's what we do on the mind side. On the body side, we realize that you probably spend more time at work than you do at home. And so we want to make sure that everything you need to be as successful as you want to be is there in place. So there's the simple things like just what do you want your day-to-day to look like? What different things can help you accomplish your job? But then what are those other things that just make you a better person, a healthier person? So we have all kinds of different programs and opportunities to make sure you can do things like maybe team up with a dietitian to help your diet, right? Your health needs. I want to start an exercise program. I want to target something. I want some better early preventative medical attention so that I can do things before it becomes too late. So we have different programs like that. Now, not totally related to body, but we also have employee experience teams that we've started up that actually go around at your local site to see what's not working, what could be improved, what can we do to just make that day much better for you. And so we take those things and we do things for our employees. And it may be simply, I want to put a couple cornhole sets here because I want to take a break and I want to talk to my friend, or I want to think, and this is a way I can think, so we do things like that. And then finally, the soul, which I think is the most important, as we just talked about earlier, it's a difficult world out there. Never mind it's the difficult world that it is inside your organization, because we in space, we all know this, we do really, really hard things, right? So we want to make sure your soul is whole. And what do I mean by that? I think it's a lot of things that we just talked about, just like Eddie described with ERGs, keepers of our culture. What makes you mentally healthy? So we're actively looking at a lot of different programs to make sure we are there when needed. And sometimes we know it's also hard for people to raise their hand and to say, I need some help. So we want to make sure that we also are active in, are you okay? Right? How many times do people stop you and say, how are you doing today? And you go, okay, and you keep walking. Well, sometimes I think you need to stop and go, no, how are you doing? Right? And there are some difficult conversations that sometimes we need to also broker, because that's when we can make some real change. So we're helping our employees, our managers really understand, one, it's acceptable to have those conversations, and two, help them navigate those. Because I think one of the biggest things that we hear when it comes to DEI and B is, I want to help, I don't know how to, or I fear I'm going to make a mistake, so I'll just be quiet. So I think we really try to look holistically at what anybody would want to have available just to make them a better person. Because if they're a better person, they're going to do better work. I think that just is an artifact. The business side takes care of itself. So I could go into a lot more detail on specific programs, but that's how we approach what we can do for each and every one of our employees.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Let me go to Christine next, and you have an interesting perspective because you're closest to the youngest generation here. And so I'm going to ask you a question that wasn't planned.
Sounds good.
All right. And so you work with people 18, or you do grad school?
Yep.
Or, all right, so 18 to 25 mostly?
Yeah.
Although I went kind of late. What are the unique characteristics that you're seeing in this latest generation that makes them more of a recruiting and retention challenge?
Yeah, so I think, the students that I'm seeing in my class right now, so right now I'm teaching spring semester junior year, that level.
20 years old.
Yep, right around 20 years old.
Yeah.
And they had senior year of high school and freshman year of college were remote, basically, right? So like, can you imagine that, right? How much learning happens of like how to organize your time, how to fold your laundry, where to get yourself on time to the place that you need to be, right? Like these basic living skills, that was all kind of remote. And so some of those skills are just basic organizational skills, right? And then you also have more of things that are more relevant to us technically, in that internships were really difficult during the pandemic, right? You have your baseline employees that are stretched to the max, just trying to get their work done. And then you ask them to take on some interns, which, on a normal day is an additional load, but now everyone, like the interns are trying to figure out the remote work, the full-time employees are trying to figure out the remote work. Like it was a very difficult situation. So these students that are graduating now or have graduated in the past few years, like they haven't had the sort of internship experience that you would normally see. And so I think that there's going to be some learning that happens in those first 2 years of people in the workforce, because they haven't had the time to figure out, what type of work do I like? What type of working environment do I like? What does it mean to show up every day and work a job? And organizations are still trying to figure out what working a job means after the pandemic. Is it showing up every day? Is it showing up 3 times a week? What does that mean? So I mean, I guess those are the main things that I see, that I think there's going to be some churn and some learning. And I think that the students that I see now in my undergrad classroom are, they're used to more flexibility than we had in the past. Good, bad, otherwise, I think that's just the way that it is. The other thing that I see is that there's a lot more options for employment for the people that are graduating, right? There's the whole commercial sector that has really grown. There's a lot more space jobs or space-related jobs. And so, I think it's not going to be enough just to pay people in space dollars, right? Like there's going to be competition for the best employees. And so I think that that's going to be a challenge for employers, figuring out who are the best employees with this kind of weird background that people might be coming in with, and then recruiting and retaining those best employees when there's still churn as we all figure out what this new workforce looks like. And you have, the existing people that are also, trying to figure out what makes them happy in a post-COVID world, your mid-career people, your day-to-day work, right?
Thank you. That's very helpful. I mean, I can imagine missing your senior year and your freshman year. I mean, how do you know who to party with, right? I mean, what? That's mind-blowing. That's an incredible loss. Thank you for that, Doctor. Eddie Gonzalez, I would like to continue this thought of the play between remote and in the office, and how do you see this settling out over time? This new normal or new transition period or whatever it is.
Yeah, I would say it's TBD. It really is. Where people trying to figure this out. We have meetings, and we have meetings about meetings, right? We have meetings to plan more meetings. So do you really want somebody to commute an hour and a half to their office to be in front of their computer doing Teams meetings, right? Yeah. If they're effective doing their work at home, then by all means, then that's the thing. However, if you're an early career hire or you're an intern, how are you going to obtain that institutional knowledge where you could walk by somebody's office and say, hey, what are you working on? Or you want to grab a cup of coffee real quick? You're not able to do that if you're, so there's a lot of pros and cons with that. And we need to figure out that balance. And it's going to take some time to do that. I know for me, early in my career, I really enjoyed going to the coffee cart and having those conversations and asking those questions. If I wasn't able to ask those questions, I wouldn't have had that detail at NASA headquarters when I did. And this was early on in my career. So it's different in this world that we're in now, this hybrid environment of trying to obtain that. And the other thing too, if I'm an early career hire, I want the blessing of somebody that's mid-career or beyond that and say, this is really good what you're working on, keep doing this, or you know what about this? Why don't you try this? And you can't have those interactions on screen sometimes, it's just difficult. So again, I think we need to find a happy medium to see where we're at with that. And as you had pointed out, which was a great point, there's some social growth that was stunted during this time. And as people are coming on center, especially people that spent their senior year of high school, missing their prom, missing all of these things that they normally would have been able to participate in, and they're trying to figure that out as well. So we have a lot of work to do, but I'm confident that we'll do it.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to Erica and ask you, what strategies are you using to help create a more diverse pool of candidates?
Sure. So I think in this diverse market, early engagement is critical, and we need to have a wider variety of folks interested in STEM careers. At SAIC in particular, that involves a lot of initiatives with our community, our educational institutions, and it's really trying to inspire folks to want to venture down that STEM career path, and if we're lucky, hopefully venture over to SAIC for a career. But some things that we are doing, we'll use a partnership we have with the STEM Achievement of Baltimore area schools, right? This focuses on grades 3 to 5 and really focuses on virtual learning and mentorship. We have some fantastic relationships with HBCUs, Bowie State as an example. Our NASA OMS program does an amazing job connecting with students from diverse backgrounds and a variety of majors to really help them navigate through their next phases of their career by providing coaching and mentoring. SAIC is one of the largest corporate sponsors for the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. That foundation provides scholarships to STEM scholars across 8 universities, one of which is actually Johns Hopkins. And then we have our ERGs. I know that Eddie spoke at length about that. We have 7 ERGs, and they are really critical in influencing our talent pipeline through their initiatives and their community outreach. But above all of that, and a lot of what we are doing for, let's just say, students and members of the community, it's what we're learning from them that is really going to help prepare us. We're learning about what's important to them, how they see the future of work, and that's important as we strategize moving forward, to be able to meet those expectations. So I could probably go on a little bit more, but that's just some of the strategies we have.
Those are great comments, and actually, I thought people were queuing up to line here, but every time someone walks toward the microphone, they take a right or left and go sit down. So I've been thrown off there. They're here. Oh, wait, hey, the challenge is there. Ma'am, please, your question.
Yes. Can you hear me? So I actually have 2 questions. I'll start with I think the easier one. The first one being, everybody's talking about AI and ML, and I'm also thinking about human-machine teaming and what that looks like for the future of work. I have a second question, but we'll start with that.
That was the easy one. I'll take a whack at anything, right? So I think the first answer is that I think the absolute correct answer is that we don't know. And what I would say is that if you go back to when I was in college, Moore's law, and the first time I was in college was the early 80s. Moore's law was supposed to be double the amount of computing capacity time in 18 months, and that was going to run out in 10 years. And we're still 10 years away from running out. So I think our ability to predict how quickly technology changes is always run short. I mean, you have more computing power in this Apple Watch than you did in the Apollo 13 mission. So I think whatever we say is largely going to be wrong. The second thing I would say is that the predictions are usually in the wrong areas. So if you look at the 50s or 60s predictions of what it would be like now, you had robots. You had going to other planets much more quickly, and really the technology now seems to be on your wrist, on your watch. I would say I really don't know. But what I think, if you can say what the current trend is, more accessibility of data. And so, you know, I have some very competitive brothers, and we used to argue all the time about baseball, basketball statistics, and now it's really on your phone. And so I think you're just speeding up the ability to get data, like this new AI chat thing. You know, it gives you data. Now, a lot of times it gives you stuff that's totally wrong. So I think it's going to be the speeding up of getting information. I haven't seen where you turn the corner and you can have a mechanical or software way to evaluate, you know, people and determine like interviews or you know, who's going to be the best NBA player. I think there are certain things about judgment that seem to be the domain of humans, but I don't know when that bridge crosses over. I don't know if anyone else sees it differently at all. So having cleared the easy question, I'm ready for the hard one now.
I was thinking too, in all the space jobs in manufacturing, right? So kind of the robotics side of some of that. The other question's a little hard to put out there, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be vulnerable. So when you were asking about talking to someone, really asking them, hey, how are you really doing today? Now, I've done that, but some folks don't take that well. So sometimes you get backlash when you're really trying to connect at a deeper level. How do you deal with that? You know, there are sensitivities. So, you know, that kind of social training on the flip side of trying to go deep, right?
Yeah, excellent question. And we struggle with that, right? And like I said earlier, I could say I just want to avoid that, so I'm not going to say anything, and I don't like that. I'd rather fumble with somebody and get to a better place. And I certainly respect if I say, hey, how are you really doing? I'm good, leave me alone, might be a response. I will leave them alone. But later on, I may come back and go, hey, I apologize. I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay, or I can help you in any way. That's it. And that conversation could stop right there. Or they may come back later and go, well, you know, now that you asked. So I do think it's again, it's those difficult conversations that really make change. I think it's a one-on-one, it's case by case. If I'm very comfortable with that person, it's okay for me to walk away and tag up with them later. If I'm not, and it's a new person, I may have to explain really quickly, apologize, I just wanted to make sure I could help, that's all, and kind of move forward. So I would rather take that risk and have a follow-up conversation than not to engage at all.
I want to add something to that, and I think it's tied to and then Eddie, because I think it's tied to the themes. I've been trying to note down the themes, and I would say if you look at this new world, I think we're really at a turning point, because I think, you know, when I was a child, we had a manufacturing society, and you had to be at work to do your job if you're building things. We transitioned away to a more of a service a society, but we haven't challenged our rules of engagement in terms of when you need to be at work. Used to be, when I was a young officer, it was the person that got there first and stayed there, and that needs to be kind of thrown out. On the other hand, going back to what Christine and Eddie have said, but if you're a second lieutenant in an office and you don't come to work, then how do you get the mentoring? How do you get socialized? I mean, I got socialized by basic training, where I spent 12 weeks getting yelled at, right? But how do you learn the secret sauce of how to be successful that the most successful people do if you're not around them? And so we really need to think through what's actually required to be at work, and then compare that to socialization. But I think, and I got a chance to know Jay just a little bit, and he's a unique person. He's a person, Indian ancestry, from Africa. He's a very gifted engineer to be a vice president at Northrop Grumman, yet he makes this his passion. And so, so if someone's asking how you are, it depends on who's asking. And so the word I underlined 3 times is relationship, relationship, relationship. You build these relationships over time. You don't, if you walk up to someone that you, and then when they're stressed, then there's an opportunity, right? But it's totally built upon the relationship that you've built, and you showed this person that you care over the lifetime of your relationship, right? So that then when you ask them how they're doing, there's a chance that they'll be comfortable enough to you to open up with them. So I feel very passionate about that, really. It's really all about relationships.
And if I may add, I
Eddie
mean,
was not, Eddie had a comment.
Yeah, thank you. I think wellness checks are very important, and I appreciate your question. Thank you for that. But here's the thing too, is I think you learn the culture of your workplace. For example, you can just call my phone where others it's like, what's that noise? Well, your phone's ringing. Well, they didn't text me first. Why are they calling me? Right? So again, it's that, how does this person like to respond? It might be an email. Send that email instead of catching them in the hallway. And if I see somebody, maybe they have their head down a little bit, hey, just checking on you, making sure that you're okay, because maybe they don't want to be approached, right? They're an introvert, whatever the case may be. So you have to figure out, to me, it's like coaching a softball team or a little league team. You want to learn the personalities of your team, of your code, of your division, and act accordingly. It might be a phone call, it might be a text message, it might be an email. Whatever that person feels comfortable with, well, then that's what I'll do. And again, it takes time and effort and repetition to learn those things.
no, I mean, I echo all of these comments, and I really do think that it's all grounded in trust, right? That trust needs to be earned as the leader, and we will, as long as they know that they're allowed to be vulnerable to the extent that they want to be, that's okay. One-on-one conversations are fine. Sometimes people feel even more vulnerable in group conversations, right? Knowing that their peers might be sharing the same challenges or struggles that they are. But yes, I think trust is definitely where it's grounded and can only build from that.
I'll give Christine an opportunity if you have something
I don't think I have anything
no
to
saved
add.
rounds? Okay, all right. Sir, floor is yours. Oh wait, who is next? Oh my gosh, more than one. All right, who is first? I have no idea.
I think the one on the right was.
All right, ma'am, please.
All right, so this question is for Eddie, because you mentioned the gap between civil servants and contractors, and I do think that that is a really key piece that we really aren't addressing as much as we could be. So because from an industry standpoint, right, most of our folks are working on site at NASA Goddard or across other federal agencies. And I do think it really speaks to a piece around belonging and how we're including those folks into the teams. So I would be interested, you said that you felt like there were efforts that were being done where you were closing the gap between the civil servants and the contractor community. So if you could give a couple of examples of how you see that working really well.
Yeah, for example, once upon a time, there were these unwritten rules where if you were not a civil servant, you weren't going to get an office with a window, for example, right? So that was huge, okay? So I am a contractor. A lot of people think I'm a civil servant, but I think that unwritten policy or rule is gone, at least in my code. I can speak to that. The other thing too is if a survey goes out, you want to make sure that the contractors have that survey as well. Otherwise, you're not getting proper information. You're not getting the whole story, right? So how do you do that? Maybe you reach out to some of these contract agencies and say, you might want to consider sending something similar or same questions. So it's those little things that I'm hoping that by 2030 that gap will be versus.
Thank you.
That's well said. It's something I need to think more about. I don't know who was next, so you have to be honest. Okay, sir.
One question I had was, how is it being made sure that international persons have equal opportunity, especially in the space industry, as compared to like US citizens?
I can take a shot at that. We need a lot of help. We need a lot of help. And thankfully, our customer has also acknowledged that we need a lot of help to do what we need to do. So they're giving us a lot more flexibility in how we kind of break up the construct of our programs. So we're able to actually have much more declassified scope than we've had before. Before, the easy answer was, well, just classify everything. That's the safest way to do it. Well, we can't afford to do it that way. So we are always actively looking for opportunities to bring just good talent in and they can start at an unclassified level. They can stay unclassified if we do a good job partitioning our programs. But if you're in and interested, we can start kind of that clearance process if you're, want to pursue that moving forward. So the good news, and I probably couldn't say this about 10 years ago, the good news is there's a lot more opportunity for unclassified efforts in the space industry. And the other thing we haven't really talked about, what are some of the challenges to the workforce coming in? What are we going to need to do in 2030? The competition is much more difficult right now than ever before, because technology that used to be very much restricted to perhaps defense industry is no longer the case. A lot of people that are in Christine's classes, it was kind of set. Aerospace, all right, you're going to go into one of these industries, NASA or defense contractor. But now there's a lot broader use of those technologies and skills. So we have to understand that, and we also have to provide those opportunities in our areas, even though it's restricted in space. But the good news is it's a lot better now than it used to be before. I hope that helps answer your question. Thank you.
I think it's your turn.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
First, I just want
patience.
to say thank you. It's really great to see people, who are walking the walk, talking the talk, and sharing their experiences doing that. So my question, it kind of stems from, my current, I'm trying to find my own, role to start a career once I graduate. And, I find that there are many positions I really want to, they describe a role that I really want to do, but then have 10, 15 years experience. I mean, I have a PhD, but it kind of also made me think, I definitely know I've been filtered out for many of these roles because I don't have that blank 10 years experience, but it makes me think, are these filters or, the way they're recruiting not risk tolerant enough? Because I've had plenty of opportunities because I'm not a disadvantaged group. But I think about, what about people who I know and I've met who have more skills than I do, but can't really express that on a resume. Thus, I know the machine would filter, if it filters me out, there's no way they'd get through. How, can companies change that, and what is being done, to just, because I think it's more than just general fix your filters, it's more also accepting higher risk when, looking for
I'd like to say something on
people.
that. That was only 4 questions, right?
Sorry.
There's only 4, right. So this is like, we get 2 here, you get 4. So that's one of the things I'm personally passionate about, and I'd be very interested to hear what anyone, but particularly Erica, has on this. Where I keep coming back to this theme, those of us baby boomers who are aging out have to rethink. Right now, if the way change works, if the way the world has worked for you, you're less likely to challenge it. And so the people that are making the hiring decisions, they are looking at a world that has really worked for them. So they're going to be very comfortable that that world is right. I have been on the wrong side of that equation more than a couple of times in my life, so maybe I have a different perspective. And we're thinking about, and of course, I think this generation, the younger generation, I think they don't require 15 years of experience. I think they can get there. I think they're smarter. I think their brains are quicker. I think they're more comfortable with change and information. And so I think we're rethinking that. The other thing that we're rethinking is the value of interviews, particularly for people who've already worked in an organization. I've been furious about this many times. If someone is your deputy and they've worked there 8 or 10 years, and you leave and you get promoted and you're interviewing them to replace you, well, why are you interviewing them? You've been interviewing them every day for 8 years, right? And interviews, we know, disproportionately rule against people of color and women. Women are much less comfortable talking about themselves, telling how great they are. Other cultures discourage and punish that if you're born in other countries. So we're working on those kinds of things, and I think I can speak for aerospace because I know. I'd be interested you're deeply involved in this, ma'am. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, so, I mean, certainly we are beginning to look at things a bit differently, similar to what you had just suggested, Ed. But I will say that sometimes it's looking for a different entry point. And when I say that, I mean, maybe taking on a role where your qualifications align, maybe it's a little bit outside of what you think you want to do, but it allows you to get your foot in the door, right? And career paths aren't always linear, right? Sometimes they go left to right, sometimes they step back before they go forward. So finding that entry point that will allow you that mobility within the organization is critical. I know in our fiscal year 24, one of our focuses in internal mobility and really putting internals first and preparing them for the next role. So that would be my best advice. I mean, we are, like I said, expanding our partnerships with educational institutions and such, and are really opening up the aperture to include students who are just graduated. It's going to take some time because obviously we have to work against some requirements from our customers, but there's definitely a way. It's just a different entry point.
So do you want to say something?
Yeah, just, you didn't ask this question, but since there's a lot of students in the audience, I wanted to just share something with you. So whether it's something as simply uploading your resume to a website, whether it's NASA or any of the other aerospace industries, depending on what your resume looks like, the software may not read it. It's going to get kicked out, and you're not going to get an email saying, sorry, we couldn't read it. And now you're waiting for an email saying, I got the interview, and you're thinking, well, I guess I didn't get it. I wasn't good enough, or I didn't have the experience, and it could have been something as simple as that. The other thing that you want to do, and now this pertains somewhat to your question, is what can I do to get my name out there? So say you're a mechanical engineer, it would be easy to type in top 10 mechanical engineers in aerospace and reach out to them on LinkedIn. But before you do that, see any abstracts they put together, any white papers, any TED Talks, any things of that nature. So you can then say, can we do a 15-minute coffee Zoom and talk about your work? And then hopefully they'll ask you about yours. And then you can ask institutional questions about how can I get to where you're at?
Great advice. Great advice. Do you have any more for us?
No,
Next one. Okay. Thank you. Ma'am.
Yeah, hi. So my question is about education. I think it's not secret to say that underrepresented groups are in underfunded schools. I mean, just look at the Baltimore High School. They have the lowest scores in all the US. So I guess my question is, what could a company do to pressure the government to change the educational policies in this country?
Any other questions? I wish you'd asked that at the beginning. I'm going to, okay, so we have an educator here.
Yeah. So as a university, okay, there's a multiple ways of going about this question, right? So I guess personally, I think middle school is a critical age. I think middle school is the critical age because middle school is what prepares you for high school, and high school you're tracked. You're tracked into the fast math track or the regular math track or the remedial math track. Same with sciences. Same, are you on the AP course? Are you on the honors course? Where are you? Right? And that is all dependent on middle school. And so I feel like middle school really doesn't get enough emphasis. As a university, we have like WIA, it's our Women in Aeronautics and Astronautics, and they have a WIA Day where we bring in middle school and high school girls and introduce them to aerospace engineering and what is aerospace engineering. And there is only so much that we can do, right, at the university to bring in students and expose them to the field. And every other engineering field is also trying to do this as well. I think your question about how do we pressure the government to improve the education system, that is a hard question. Yep. I don't know the answer to that. I wish that we could do that. I mean, I think In Maryland, we're very lucky that the university is pretty well supported by the state. We do have a lot of HBCUs in the Maryland, DC area, so we're also in a good position there. There's a lot of room for growth on building bridges between HBCUs and University of Maryland, or University of Maryland is the flagship university in our state, right? So building those bridges is important. And, I think there's a lot of fatigue on the part of the HBCUs, right? Because everyone wants to be their partner just to get access to special pots of money. And it's not really a genuine desire to, be involved. It's a big problem. I don't have a good answer for you. We're trying.
Vote. Can I add real quick? I think it doesn't do us any good to stand up in front of government and go, "What's wrong? Aren't you guys doing something?" I can, but I think the next piece of that conversation is what actually is the problem? Is it lack of resources? Is it something that we expected that didn't happen? I think if you get to that level to understand what caused the decline, and then we as a community can now step in. My company can step in if it was resources, right? So I think we got to get to that level of understanding before we can help address, because I don't think it's just the government or the public that's going to be responsible for that. I think we all play a role in the education of our children. So understanding where we are in that equation, I think would help.
I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to one last one. One last one. Thank you.
Thank you. So while I don't identify as timing out, there's a lot of things you didn't address that I think ought to be brought up. This is a systems engineering problem. Workforce for 2030, you have to go back, and I disagree, it's not middle school, it's K through 5. If you go to JPL and they go to the Imagineering lab, they go to Tinker Toys and Lego blocks to figure out how to do sky cranes on Mars. And they tie into that 6-year-old self that doesn't know physics and doesn't know what no means. They know what they can play, and if they can play it and imagine it, it can be. And what we do, what I've done in the past, is I invest in the K through 5 programs to get the educators talented enough to be okay teaching math and science because all they learned was English or history. So I would challenge you that the workforce of 2030, you got to go back and say, well, if I'm going to hire them in 2030, where are they today?
Absolutely.
And what are the folks that are going to be there in 2040? So we didn't get to it. There's a lot of stuff on this panel, but it's a systems problem. So I agree. By the time they get to college, you've already narrowed the pipeline that we can draw from. We have to get a larger pipeline to start with and maintain it throughout its life cycle. So it's not so much a question as a challenge, add the whole system in the problem, because it's not, I heard a lot of commentary about how do I retain the people I have? And that's interesting. That doesn't build the pipeline. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. We're going to do one more question. Well, one question.
Hi, I had a question about specifically, you guys were talking about employee resource groups in the aerospace workforce, but as the aerospace industry grows larger and larger, I was wondering about your thoughts on unionization efforts in the industry and its potential for, and what you think, and like its effects on the industry, and if you would support such a movement.
I didn't hear it. What?
Oh, sorry. I was asking about your thoughts on unionization efforts in the industry.
Oh, unionization.
And just your thoughts in general.
I would love to hear from that end of the table on that one.
Yeah, we actually just had a union contract ratified in our Stennis Space Center team for electrical or electricians, and there's definitely unionized population on our FAA contracts. I would anticipate seeing it more, right? If the last couple of years is going to continue, then I would anticipate more. There's a lot of education that we, from an HR and business leader standpoint, need to provide our teams of people, and how the union may or may not help them, or how the union may or may not help us. So I don't think there's an end to it in sight. We just have to prepare for it and understand it a little bit better.
And we have unions in aerospace. We do. We have the stand up, we're getting the hook here. So I'm going to take 1 minute and thank all of you for your participation. Thank the Goddard Institute and Jim for inviting us out here. This has been an outstanding panel. A couple of the themes before I ask you for applause to these guys is that I think that the biggest theme is that how do we transition into what the new normal will be, and try to decide what really has to be done at work, to include things like learning, socialization, and some of the best friends I have in my life are people I've met at work. And so if I was sitting here and had sweats underneath, was on a television, how would I know those people? And also some things about contractor treatment, differently abled, and international. So I want to thank you all for this has been an outstanding panel. You guys are great. Would you join me in giving them applause? Jim, over to you.